And welcome to What's Up Williston, the town's monthly TV show where we take a closer look at things going on in town. I'm your host, Erik Wells. Pleased to be joined this month by Town Manager Rick McGuire. Rick, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, my pleasure, Erik.
It's just about town meeting day. We're less than 2 weeks away, so we thought we could devote most of this episode of looking at the town budget and what's involved in the process to create it. Rick, I thought we could get started by discussing at a really high level what the town budget accomplishes. It really comes down to a plan for services, right?
That's right. People often think of budgets about numbers. That's the first thing that comes into your mind, and they often use terms about cutting this, but really it's about services. What services do you want? What services do you want to add, detract from the budget? That's really the function of a budget. It's a plan for the services that the community wants. And so if you're talking about reducing the budget, then that ought to be part of the discussion. What services do you want to change? And there's obviously ways you can provide the services more efficiently or effectively or in different ways. But it's really the first focus should be on services.
And we're not going to drill into the numbers too much here, but I thought quickly we could touch on it's $11.5 million just about operating budget. And it's made into a number of different expenses. There's a slide here that breaks down the expenses of the operating budget. Or a couple key takeaways when we look at our town expenses.
Well, first of all, as I just said, services are a really important part of the budget. And so we're really, if you're looking at it as a business standpoint, we're a service-oriented business. And so because of that, it's labor-intensive. And so, as you might imagine, then labor is a large part of our budget. Generally, it's a little over 50% when you take both the salaries and benefits into account. So that's one takeaway. Another is when you look at the range of services, and we do provide a wide range. I counted up to 180 different services. Now, we think of police, fire, library service, recreation, but within each department, there's a wide range of smaller services that we provide that you might not ordinarily think of. So, but if you take the services and look at what type of services we provide, the vast majority, over 50% of the services we provide are public safety related. For example, police, fire, and public works. I mean, the main job of public works really is to maintain the safety of the roads. So that's really an important focus of our budget is public safety related activities and services.
Absolutely. One other slide we can look at quickly is, the balance that expenditure side is our revenue side, and maybe a couple key takeaways on the revenue side of the budget.
Well, as in most towns in Vermont anyway, property tax is a huge part of it. I think it's just a little bit less than half for Williston. Most communities, though, you'll find that it's actually closer to 75% of the total revenue. And the reason why Williston is not that high, in part, is because of the local option tax, which is in the range of 25% of the overall revenue that we get. And of course, we have a range of other user fees, and we have some host town fees, which most communities don't have as well. So it's a pretty good balance of revenues. And so because of that balance, we're able to rely a little bit less on the property tax and more on other taxes. Of course, the downside is, particularly on the local option tax, is that it's a large part of our budget and it's also highly volatile. And so we could see huge swings up and down depending on the economy for the most part.
One thing I wanted to ask you, you've been town manager in Williston just about 21 years now. You've been through a couple budget processes in town. I wonder if you could reflect on that time period. What kind of stands out to you, municipal budgeting over time? Anything that's changed?
Oh, well, a lot has changed, but it's been incremental changes over the years. When I first came to town, the capital budget was like a one-pager with a long list of items that people wanted, but there was no necessarily basis in reality. Now it's, I don't know how many pages, probably 100 pages or so, which has a lot of detail. I think the important takeaway, though, is that every year we go through this, we're always trying to fine-tune it and make it a better process, a better format, better ways of communicating. It's not an easy topic to communicate because budgets aren't the most exciting thing in the world, but it is an important document, so we'd like to be able to reach out to people and get them involved in the process in any way we can. And we're working on a video series that we're posting online to provide maybe a little bit of education if people want to just learn a little bit about one topic. So there's a number of things we're doing, but it's not a topic that everyone just wants to dive right into.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of pieces like we were just discussing here. Next, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit into process. $11.5 million budget, it takes a lot of time to develop and get that ready for voters on town meeting. But when does the town start its budget process for the next cycle?
Well, it starts almost the day after the town meeting when the budget is actually voted upon. And that's when we go through that process I just talked about a moment ago, about looking at the process, the format, and the way we've communicated, because it's all fresh in our mind at that point, and it gives us an opportunity to reflect and think about how we might want to do things differently for the next year. And so that begins to lay the groundwork for the budget process. The actual next step after that really is starting in late August, early September, where we begin the distribution of the forms that each department's required to fill out, and then they complete the forms, and then we start the review process from there.
So when a department head is working on their budget, what are they looking at? What are some factors that are playing into that? How do they get that budget together?
Well, they do look at a number of things. I think one of the things they look at is how much money they're spending in the current year compared to how much they have budgeted. They can also look back to prior years and see how much was budgeted in prior years and how much they actually spent in prior years. And that's a general guide, but and of course you have to look at, well, what are the costs for next year? What is the cost of gasoline going to be next year? What is the cost of buying sand or salt for the upcoming year? Those are important things. And so you have to kind of research and call vendors and see, well, do you have a sense of what things are going to look like? But then you also have to relate it back to the services that you're providing. Is there going to be any change in the services? Or is the demand changing, for example? Because Williston has been a growing community. We've been averaging about 100 new people a year. And that tends to add up over time.
Our population doubles during the day about too,
well, that's the other factor.
The workers coming in.
Yeah, that's a good point. We talk about the population, but when we have over 9,000 people living in town, but we have a lot of people working in town and shopping in town. So that does impact the services that are being demanded of our community, particularly on the public safety related services.
So we've got department heads, they get their budget together, finance director helps oversee that process, and then it gets on your desk for the town manager to review. When you get those draft budgets by each department, what are you looking for? Maybe some external and internal factors that play into that review.
Well, on the external side of things, there are a number of things we have to consider, and the select board also takes this into account. And we're talking about maybe even providing them an early report before we get into the budget process so that they can evaluate some of these factors and maybe give some preliminary guidance to staff as we go through the budget preparation process. And things like inflation rate, perhaps the economy, so if we're heading into a recession or in the middle of a recession, that might mean something different than when the economy is booming, for example. The population trends, are they continuing? Is the demand for service continuing? Have we added more roads to our network of roads in town? All these things have an impact on the services we provide, and of course they have an impact on the budget because it requires more resources as the community grows. And I guess another factor would be our grand list, which is our tax base. And if that's increasing rapidly, that means something different than if it's not increasing at all. And so those are a number of the external factors. On the internal side, we're looking at the nitty-gritty of, and so I've mentioned most of the items already about, the cost of different items you have to purchase, we have different ways of looking at it. We can look at it at strictly a department level. We can look at it across all the different departments. For example, if we're looking at, say, gasoline, well, not just one department purchases gasoline. The fire department, police department, I think are the two primary, and Public Works. And so we're looking at across the different departments and seeing how much each department is thinking. And we generally do research and come up with a single rate, what we're projecting for the upcoming year, so that one department isn't estimating $3 a gallon and another department $4 a gallon. But it's just a guess. We don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
And
so calendar-wise, this is kind of getting us through August, September, October, November, when all these numbers are really getting crunched internally, and this is operating budget along with the capital budget that we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. So usually around early December or so, if I remember correctly, the select board will get the first budget to start reviewing. And what does their review process look like?
Well, when they get the budget, it's a huge document. And they meet with each department head and go through a lot of detail in the budgets. And it's also a good opportunity for each department to kind of give an update on what's going on within the department, what things do they see that they need now, what things may be affecting the department in the future, some various trends. And the time that the board does this, it's a busy time of year, which is unfortunate because of the way the calendar falls. But as you mentioned, they are doing in December. And normally people are busy doing other things in December, but the board generally meets just about every single week during the months of December and January. And once they review all the different departments, they kind of have to make some tough decisions affecting services in the community. And there have been times when we've reduced services, when times were tough and the board wanted to keep the budget at a level funded amount. It did impact services.
These meetings are really when the board gives a lot of scrutiny to line items and really looking throughout the whole budget. And these are public meetings, open for anyone in the community to stop by. And this is a really good opportunity to weigh in on specific factors in the budget as the select board taking a look at it, right?
Right. It's a good opportunity, but not everyone can come to the board meetings.
Yeah.
And so we try to make other avenues for citizens to become informed on what's included in the budget and what the issues are. They can go online because the budgets are posted online. They can actually watch the meetings either during the course of the meeting, because I believe the meetings are usually live streamed.
Yep.
And they're also available, on tape afterwards. You can go online and actually watch the whole select board meeting through the access to Channel 17. So there's multiple ways. We have printed documents that go out on the budget. In particular, we have the annual report. I happen to have a copy here.
Hot off the press.
Hot off the press. And there's also a flyer that goes out. And of course, you can take the old-fashioned way and give us a call or send us an email. So there's multiple ways people get information, and I certainly encourage people to do that because this is an important document. It really is a plan for the services, and people appreciate the services in our community.
Yeah. So that's a good overview of the process. Definitely a lot involved with it. Next, I thought we'll take a quick break here and take a look at a video that kind of delves closer into property tax, the grand list, and setting the tax rate, what that relationship looks like. So we'll roll that video and come back with Rick here in just a couple minutes. The land within the boundaries of Williston is divided into hundreds of individual pieces called parcels. A fair market property value is assigned to each parcel, and the list of all properties in town with the value of each is known as the grand list. Fair market value should reflect the price which a typical buyer would purchase the property for as of the last date of reappraisal. For example, the last reappraisal was in 2016 in Williston, and all values in town are based upon April 1st, 2016.
The assessment for each individual property in Williston is based upon past sales data and a variety of other methodology by the Board of Listers with professional guidance by the town assessor. Factors that may influence value include location, quality, and size, among other factors. For example, a commercial parcel in Taft Corners has a significantly different value than a vacant parcel in a residential area south of the interstate. Changes to a parcel affect the property value. For example, if the open field becomes developed, then the new value will be significantly greater. Not only does new construction change the market value of a property, other influences could include subdivisions, zoning changes, or permitted lots. On a smaller scale, if you build a garage or add a deck to your home, that will increase the property value. Each year, the grand list is based upon what is present in town as of April 1st of that year. For example, if a dwelling was 50% complete as of April 1st, it will be set in the forthcoming grand list at half of the building value. During the budget development process from November through January, the town manager's office works closely with the town assessor to examine what the grand list value will be for the coming fiscal year. The grand list serves as a tax base for property taxes. To balance revenue and expenses in the budget, the town will determine how much needs to be raised from property taxes. The municipal tax rate is applied to each $100 of assessed value to determine property taxes for the next fiscal year. For example, if a property value is $200,000 and the tax rate is 27 cents, the municipal taxes due would be calculated like this. $200,000 divided by $100 of assessed value equals $2,000. $2,000 times a tax rate of 27 cents equals a $540 municipal property tax. Education taxes paid to the state of Vermont have a separate tax rate applied to the property value, and they are included with the municipal taxes on your bill. Williston's tax rate has been one of the lowest in Chittenden County for a number of years. Property taxes make up about 50% of the revenue needed for town operations each year. The town's local options tax for sales, rooms, and meals contributes about 25%, while the remaining quarter comes from a variety of other sources. To balance the budget, all revenue sources other than property taxes are added up and subtracted from the amount to be spent. The difference is what needs to be raised from property taxes. The Select Board is made aware throughout the budget process what impact budgetary changes could have on the tax rate before the budget is sent to voters on town meeting day. For example, if the town needs to raise $5.3 million in property taxes and has a grand list value of $19.8 million, then the tax rate would equate to 26.7 cents. If the grand list is growing, then the same tax rate will produce more revenue from one year to the next. During the budget process, from November to March, the grand list value is the best estimate. The grand list must be filed with the town clerk no later than May 24th, and the final grand list, which is the basis for the tax rate, must be filed prior to July 1st. The values contained in the final grand list are all based upon what was present as of the previous April 1st. At town meeting, voters are asked to approve the overall budget amount. The projected tax rate that is shared leading up to town meeting could change depending on where the final grand list value lands. The final tax rate will be set by the Select Board in June for the coming fiscal year, and bills mailed out shortly after. Thanks for watching this budget information video from the town of Williston. Please comment on this video and let the town know what was helpful, what would you like additional information about, and what other budget topics you are interested in. To learn more and stay updated on new budget information and ways to connect with the town, please visit the town website, social media channels, and watch for updates on Front Porch Forum and from town emails.
All right, as we can see in that video, the grand list is a major factor in influencing property tax and property tax rate in town. Rick, kind of jumping back into this, I wonder if we could talk about with a growing grand list, how does that help in funding services in town?
Well, the grand list, as you learned from the video, is a compilation of all the values in town, and if it's increasing, that means you have more, it's a bigger tax base and you have more money to support the services that you're providing. Of course, it also means that there's a reason why it's growing, and that means you have more businesses, more homes, and that also increases demand for services. So it's always a balancing act, whichever way you look at it.
So a couple other topics I wanted to touch on here for this episode. One's called the fund balance. And budget is a plan for providing services each year, but what if you don't end up having to spend the full budget? Well, can you explain what a fund balance is and what goes into that?
Sure. Well, if the money isn't spent, whether we've been very conservative on revenues and have more revenues coming in, or also we're conservative on expenditures and underspent on expenditures, and usually we do both. We try to be conservative. That does mean there's money left over unspent at the end of the fiscal year, which ends June 30th of each year. So that money just rolls over into what you call, and it is called the fund balance. And so if that money in the fund balance isn't spent during the course of the year, then if there's a surplus in the operating expenses in the following year, then that gets rolled into that as well. So it can grow over time. And partly it serves as a rainy day fund, and we have used it in the past when we've had significant decreases in the local option tax. We've been able to use some of the fund balance. But the danger is that if you use too much of that money to reduce taxes directly, then it's not sustainable. And you end up with having to make up in the following year the money that you had spent as a one-time revenue. You don't have that the following year, and you have maybe an increase in expenditures on top of that. So it's a huge kind of change from year to year if you're not prudent in the way you use the fund balance.
So if someone asks, why couldn't you just use some leftover funds for whatever reason to just drastically reduce property taxes one year? That's a short-term solution, but long-term it's going to create a much larger compounded issue.
Right, and I think the other point is that there are ways of using fund balance in a way that's sustainable and responsible, because you don't want to keep just having this accumulate, because it's money that really belongs to the taxpayers. So one way of using that money is to use it for one-time expenses. Let's say you need to replace a roof on a town building. Then what you can do is say, well, that's not going to happen for another 20 years. Let's pay that in all in 1 year using fund balance monies. And it's not going to be a recurring expense, but it does go back to the taxpayers in that form, because if they didn't have that money, then they would have had to raise taxes even higher to pay for it. So that's one sustainable way of using fund balance. But generally, we do know that from year to year, we're going to have a certain amount of leftover because we are conservative in the way we do our estimating. And that is sustainable as long as we're consistent from year to year. So we've been taking $400,000 or $500,000 every year and just plowing that back into the budget as a regular revenue out of the fund balance.
Is there kind of a rule of thumb? I believe the town has a policy for how much money to keep in that fund balance.
Right. Long time ago, the select board did adopt a policy so that it would provide general guidance. And what they did is decided that our fund balance should generally remain in the range of 10 to 20% of our total expenditure.
Okay.
So if you have a $10 million budget, that would be $1 million in fund balance money that we, at the 10% level, or $2 million at a 20% level, that we should keep there as a buffer, as a rainy day fund for future expenses.
Okay. So another topic that we touched on a little bit earlier is the capital budget. And I wonder if you could talk about what types of things the town purchases through the capital budget, and what is, I know there's some certain requirements for something to be considered a capital asset that you would buy through that budget.
Right. The reason for a capital budget is to kind of allow for a planning document that looks at the longer term. So it's not a year-to-year thing, it's a multi-year plan, really. It's like a 6-year plan, the current fiscal year and plus 5. And the types of things that we want to include in that are items that involve a significant expense, number one, and two, projects that may take multiple years to complete. Because an operating budget, it's year to year, and if you don't spend it at the end of the year, you lose it, basically. I mean, it does lose, it goes in the fund balance, and then it has to be reallocated. In the capital budget, the money stays there until it's actually spent. And so, for example, let's say we want to buy a new fire truck, which is a topic right now, then what you'll do is, and that's a multi-year project because it takes 2 to 3 years to actually buy a fire truck. And so you get the bond vote approved for that, which is part of the capital budget, and then that allows you to actually go through the steps in the upcoming years to actually go and purchase the document. Another example might be a major improvement to a building. I used the example of roof a moment ago. That can take multiple years to plan and complete, or perhaps intersection improvements, or that kind of thing. So these are all either infrastructure improvements or large expenses that take multiple years to complete. And plus some of these infrastructure improvements sometimes are interrelated, and so you kind of want to plan them together so that you're not paving a road and then a year later putting in a new sewer line.
Yeah, dig it right up.
So that it makes sense to kind of put these into a docket and plan them out together.
You mentioned bonding for funds, taking out debt to pay for large expenses like a fire truck or a new building. And then there's also some other planning I know we do in town for equipment replacement, like a new dump truck for the highway department, a new loader, and we kind of, if you could explain what that looks like with kind of a sinking fund model where we put money aside when we know we need to replace these pieces of equipment.
Right, yeah, we call it an equipment fund. It's really an integral part of our capital budget. But when I first started working in the town, we were trying to plan out all these different pieces of equipment, and there's lots of them. And it was a nightmare trying to plan out which ones we're going to buy when and have a reasonably level amount of funding from year to year, so you didn't have peaks and valleys where you bought 2 large trucks in one year and none the next year. It made sense to try to level out. So we set this equipment fund up so that a little amount gets placed in every year. So if, let's say a vehicle has a 10-year life, we'll put in 1/10 of that value each year. And then when the 10 years is over, then we have enough money to buy that piece of equipment.
Perfect, that works well.
This does.
So finally, Rick, I wanted to talk about enterprise funds in town. These are sewer, water, stormwater funds. How are these put together and how are they managed?
Well, as far as putting them together, they're pretty much put together the same way as the other budgets, but they are distinct in the sense that these are funds that are totally self-supporting. There's no tax dollars that go into these. The only money that goes into these are from the users of those systems, and they pay for the services that that particular enterprise fund supports. So, for example, sewer fund, the sewer users pay into that, and they receive the services to collect the waste and distribute it to the village of Essex Junction where it's treated, and we have treatment costs. So those are all totally self-supporting funds.
Those are all separate from, so different pools of money than, say, property tax revenue that goes into our operating budget or our general fund.
That's correct.
And these are approved by the select board, but the voters don't vote on our enterprise funds. The select board approves those budgets.
Yes, that's correct.
So I think we've covered a lot with budgeting. There's a lot to it, a lot of different budgets in town. And certainly, folks should feel free to check out our website for more information, for additional videos, or stop by the town hall if they have any questions. So that's a big topic this month with town meeting coming up. Finally, at What's Up Williston, we want to do our monthly community notebook, look at a couple things going on in town. And Rick, you want to hang around for this for a minute?
Oh, sure, I'd love to.
Feel free to chime in here. So we'll go to the PowerPoint we've got here. So reminder, what we've talked about, town meeting is coming up. Monday, March 4th, starting at 7 in the Williston Central School Auditorium, we'll have our annual town meeting, followed by ballot item discussions by both the school district and the town. There'll be Australian ballot voting will be the next day, Tuesday, March the 5th. Voting will be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Armory, and that's located right next to the Town Hall Annex in the village. And we ask folks, please be mindful, there'll be a lot of traffic that day. We may have some traffic routes set up for people getting in and out of the parking lot. Really be careful and mindful because we expect a good turnout of our residents to vote that day. If you're not able to make it or able to vote on actual town meeting day, feel free to request an absentee ballot for town meeting. Just give the town clerk's office a call. You could also stop by the town hall from now or any time up to town meeting day to vote early. If not registered to vote, we can give you information about registering, and you can also vote on town meeting day. We have the same day voter registration. Reminder, it's that time of year again to register your dog. Licenses are available in the town clerk's office, and remember, you need to have your dog registered by April 1st. And a couple events coming up here we wanted to preview. We're working on a substance use and prevention forum, and Rick, wondered if you might be able to share a little more detail about that as we're planning it.
Well, this is a really important event, in my view anyway, coming up. We've heard a lot about opiate abuse, and there's been some tragic examples of that in the news about young people who have succumbed to substance abuse and passed away because of overdoses. But the issue is really far more than that. In fact, of substance abuse really involves far more than just opiates. Alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, those are all substances which are probably overall abused far more than opiates. Opiates are bringing in a lot of the publicity, but those are substances that, particularly young people, because young people in our communities, their brains aren't fully formed, and the use of these substances can have a disproportionate impact on the future health of their brains. And so this forum is intended to look at some of these issues and really explore what things can be done to prevent this from happening to begin with. And there are examples out there. There are countries that have tried prevention programs. There's states, communities, and they've been successful. So are there elements of those programs that we can try in Williston to successfully reduce the amount of abuse of various substances?
So folks should save the date. It's Wednesday, April the 10th. It's at Williston Central School. It's free to attend. We'll be offering dinner, free meal for anyone as well to come in from 6 to 6:30. Then we'll have a program from 6:30 to about 8:30. Really looking to help get the word out about this, really have a great community conversation and dialogue that evening. In the March episode of What's Up Williston, we'll delve further into this issue and this forum, and I'll have a couple guests to speak more about this. Another piece, we're right in the Old Brick Church concert series right now, and March concert is coming up Friday, March the 8th. Performance by the group Rowan. Doors open at 6:30 and the show starts at 7 o'clock. There's information about how to purchase tickets on the town website, or you can stop by the town clerk's office to purchase. And Rick, I know you're involved in this series as well. I wonder if you wanted to speak a little bit about this performance coming up.
I would love to. I'm a big fan of music, and I've been involved with this along with a bunch of other people for 11 years now. This is our 11th season. And we're excited about this performance coming up in March for Rowan. They're kind of a Celtic-based traditional music, and it kind of fits in with the season with St. Patrick's Day fast approaching, so we're excited to have their performance. And we have a really good program in April, to the end of April. We have a pretty well-known folk artist that travels nationally that will be performing. So we're excited about wrapping up our season this year.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been another successful season.
Absolutely, and of course the big thing about the series is we end up donating money to various community groups, and the March concert will benefit the Vermont chapter of the Parkinson's Disease Association. So it's a good cause, and so I encourage people, if they like music at all, to come out and join us. And you actually may be surprised at how good the acoustics are and how good the quality music is. It's a really great program.
Oh, great. Another great thing coming up here in town. And if I was to wrap up, reminder, Town of Williston is on social media. Give us a follow on Twitter at Town Williston VT, and also like us on Facebook. Try to share a lot of information on there as well. And as always with this program, looking for feedback and segment ideas. My contact information's on the screen. I'm happy to talk with you and see how we can add something to the show or do something to continue to improve it as we go along here. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this month. I want to thank Rick for being on and helping us delve into the budget process, and Megan, our director today behind the scenes, making everything work for the show. I'm Erik Wells. I'll join you in March, and I'll see you around town. Thank you.